Hello, and thank you for listening to Mapping the Zone, a podcast that is ordinarily dedicated to informal discussion of the work and context of Thomas Pynchon. However, sometimes we forestall the progress of our own program when something big enough comes along. And there's been a couple of moments like that, not just this year, but over the course of our program's life. However, perhaps none so big as the release of not just another Paul Thomas Anderson film, but another Paul Thomas Anderson film that is more or less an adaptation of a Thomas Pynchon novel. I think that sort of my quota has been met with Inherent Vice being released as far as faithful adaptations of his book is concerned. I don't think that anyone's ever going to be able to do that again. So this is an exciting new way to experience his material on the screen, and it does not at all surprise me that it came from the exact same director. So just to give you guys an idea, all of us have seen this movie, courtesy of our lovely patrons and supporters that we have donating to the show. We were all able to get tickets to see this. I think all of us saw it in IMAX too, which is neat.
Yeah.
It's the first IMAX I've ever actually seen. So we're gonna just kind of go through our impressions of the film and then kind of talk about it in context of it being an adapted work from Pynchon's source material. For those, if somehow you are not aware, One Battle After Another is the brand new film from Paul Thomas Anderson that is adapted from an attempt by Paul Thomas Anderson to make a film out of Thomas Pynchon's novel Vineland. He found that it was a bit too difficult to do just a straightforward adaptation of, which is completely understandable. And so he chose to kind of take the most resonant parts emotionally to him, and according to Paul Thomas Anderson, with Thomas Pynchon's consent, was able to work those into a new script that became the movie that has just now been released in theaters. My name is Kate, and I'm one of the co-hosts.
I'm Cody.
I'm Will.
And I'm Luke.
So, in no particular order, who wants to go first? What did they think of this film?
Just to kind of get right to it, I loved it. It was a fantastic film. I have been a big fan of Paul Thomas Anderson since I think it was around 2002, 2003. It was right before Punch Drunk Love came out. I found a VHS copy of Magnolia at Blockbuster, and I picked it up and watched it. Yeah. And it very quickly became my favorite film. It still is, in spite of all of its flaws, most of which live in the third act. It's just a movie that resonated with me. It was one of those like perfect time, perfect film kind of moments. So I have followed his career very closely since then. And when this was announced, I do remember we had several discussions during our Vineland coverage when the news started to come out about Paul Thomas Anderson is finally doing this Vineland adaptation, and whether we thought this was going to be a straightforward adaptation or if it was going to be a more loose kind of structure of it. And I was of the opinion at the time that it would be more akin to the adaptation of There Will Be Blood coming from Oil by Upton Sinclair. I stand by that, and I think that's pretty much what it was. I will also say I was, I think, incorrectly under the idea that it was not going to be a great film, and I was wrong. I think I was concerned, I think, after Licorice Pizza came out, because I didn't enjoy that film at all.
Neither did I.
I liked aspects of it that did not involve the plot. I liked the cinematography. I liked the direction. I liked the acting. I thought the plot was awful, and it really felt like a huge misstep for him. So my expectations when this was announced were pretty low. And then the trailer came out, and my expectations skyrocketed. And when I saw the movie, which was last night, it blew me away in every way, shape, and form. The performances were top notch. It was beautifully filmed. Some of the shots were so perfect for what they were trying to do. The score was brilliant. this might be his funniest movie since Boogie Nights, and it might even, I think, be funnier than Boogie Nights.
Yeah, I would agree.
It is just an all around stellar film, and I really want to watch it again. It's been on my mind for the last 24 hours now, and I just want to see it again.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And to kind of I think I was maybe more skeptical than you. I was skeptical up until the critical reaction started to come out, because like the trailer had come out, and I thought to myself,
Mhm.
okay, this seems fun. This seems interesting. Um, I'm not as worried as I was previously, but it wasn't until the like overwhelming, and I can't think of a movie in my lifetime that has had the critical reception that this has had. Like, there's been big movies that have certainly come out that have had big critical reactions, but like for Steven Spielberg to say what he said about the movie, or for all of the other critics who are calling it like the award season is basically over the moment the movie came out, was a big surprise to me. Um, and that was when my like caution about it started to get turned down. And then it was maybe 3 minutes into the movie before I was like, okay, I don't think I really have anything to be worried about.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think most of my like trepidation over it comes from the fact that there was like a weird for Paul Thomas Anderson drip feed of information over the past like 3.5 years
Mhm.
of this movie, like going from being what he was doing next to not being what he was doing next to definitely being what was next to it's in modern times and not the 80s to like everything about it is changing from the book from a structural perspective to the casting announcement. That was when I remember we had a, I don't know if it was actually on a recording of our show, but we had a pretty extensive discussion amongst the four of us of like, who the fuck is Leonardo DiCaprio playing?
Yeah.
Like none of us, if I remember correctly, had assumed that he was playing the Zoid stand-in. Um, and just considering like who these different casting announcements could possibly be. Um, and so like I had a lot of sort of trepidation, and part of that was built up as a result of Licorice Pizza. That's a movie that I'm unsure why it exists.
Yep.
Is the way
That's a good way to put that.
is the way that I feel about Licorice Pizza. It's like the one aspect of his filmography that I don't understand what he was trying to do. I don't understand why he did that. Um, yeah, the acting and the cinematography and all of the other stuff about it is great, but just the film itself, the movie ended, and I think I just looked at my friend in the theater and I went, okay, and then we left. Um, and so yeah, I had a lot of concern going in, and then yeah, it's a fantastic movie. I would agree that it is easily his funniest. Um, it is also in some ways, interestingly, his most accessible. I would argue, from a perspective of the storyline. Like Licorice Pizza, I guess, is technically a more accessible film, but I don't know why someone would watch it. So like from from the perspective of like his movies, their length, their relative plot density, and their relative content, I feel like this is actually going to be a lot easier of a pathway in for his filmography than a lot of the other sort of traditional options.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that that's a good thing, because I also think that this is probably his most overt political statement as far as a film is concerned. Um, and that there will be a lot of draw to it as a result of that. I mean, already a lot of the actual reviews that have been put out by um, film review outlets speak heavily about how relevant the film feels coming out now. And that was a thing that me and my partner had talked about when we were going out after the film had ended, is like, for a script that he wrote, who knows, 3 4 years ago, and for a film that he shot last year, to be this relevant in the specific political subject matter that it's handling from a perspective of like the immigration crisis and the ways in which white supremacy and political power have become so entwined into that from a messaging system is really impressive. And it feels very prescient that that's how the direction he decided to take in his sort of modern update. Um, and then, yeah, I think that the humor is especially good in this film because if it wasn't as funny as it is, this film would be depressing as hell and
Yep.
would be incredibly difficult to watch um, during Trump's second term in office. um, but yeah, every performance from top to bottom is excellent. Sean Penn in particular was
Yeah.
was incredibly impressive to me. That's a guy who I feel like hasn't tried in a movie or performance that he's been in for some time. Um, and everything about his performance in this film felt very convincing, like very embodied. Like from the way that he walks, from the like weird ketamine twitching that he does the entire
Yeah.
film to like the tone of voice that he has and his like clipped manner of speaking to just like his weird presentation of himself, all of that. It feels again very fitting for the kind of cartoon dystopia that not just Pynchon used to, write with Vineland in particular and really the rest of his books, but also the kind of cartoon dystopia of, the second Trump administration. Like he feels like someone who should be working for Pete Hegseth. Um and yeah, and Leonardo DiCaprio, in my opinion, has also been more or less playing himself for a few years now.
Mhm.
But he also really, really surprised me with his performance. I think it helps that for most of the film you can't see most of his face. But his sort of angry, paranoid, sort of outrage that comes out of him for the first hour and a half of the movie is really excellent and really played for laughs in a great way, while also making sense for the character. Yeah, Teyana Taylor gives an amazing performance for her, 15, 20 minutes of screen time. And just across the board, like I can't point to any specific element of this movie that wasn't done well. The cinematography in the car chase at the end,
Oh my god.
going over the hills, was something that I had never seen in a movie before, um, and was super impressive to see in especially like a wide format showing of the film. Yeah, and it was to speak a bit about like PTA's sort of directorial style. This almost felt like a blending of his early career and his later career, in that in a lot of his early films, he did these big, elaborate one take sequences that kind of showed off his capabilities as a director. It was something that got him a lot of attention when he was first starting out because it wasn't the hallmark of a sort of a first time filmmaker or a less mature filmmaker. And then, kind of as he moved further into his career with The Master and Phantom Thread and Inherent Vice, he kind of stopped doing that. Almost starting with There'll Be Blood, where it was a lot more
Mhm.
long single takes of just actors performing the scene, more steady camera movement. And this film felt like a good balance of both halves of that style. There's big, long, impressive sequences and takes that happen here, but then there's also very simple, extended takes of just dialogue or one situation taking place. And so it really felt like a good synthesis of the two halves of his filmography. And it makes me really curious what he does next. I mean, I'm always interested in what he's going to do next, but um, specifically as it borrows from both halves of his time as a director so far, I was very impressed by. Um, yeah, I've been talking like a long time, so those are my first impressions. What else do you guys think, Luke? Will?
I really enjoyed the movie. What I'll say is that I kind of had a very different uh, I guess, preemptive relationship with the movie than the rest of y'all did. I think, unless Luke's gonna surprise us with some secrets. But I really just I trusted Paul Thomas Anderson up until the trailer came out, and immediately I was very concerned because up until then the movie was ambiguous as all get out, and perhaps it was going to be a true adaptation, and perhaps it was going to be an adaptation but set forward in time, and perhaps yada yada. And only when the trailer came out did we get the fact that it was not a true adaptation, I would say. And also that it would be shifted away from being about the dynamics of one of the central themes in Vineland was the way that being a filmmaker affected you, or being part of journalism, even guerrilla journalism, what that meant. And seeing that that had basically been swapped out for, superficially basic action had me very concerned. And then I would like to, I'm sorry to do this, but my microphone was not working for a split second earlier, and as a result, I have to correct you, Kate. I did not see it in IMAX. I saw it. Yeah, I saw it in the wonderful IMAX knockoff in Cinemark XD, which is basically the same deal, slightly smaller format, but same dynamics, really. Same aspect ratios, similar audio stuff. Not a huge difference. And to make up for that 1 foot in each direction that I lost, I then saw it again on a really crappy, in a crappy theater the next night. So I can say what I was very concerned about on my first viewing was all those beautiful wide shots and all those incredible car chases. Do they work on a smaller screen? Because frankly, the screen I saw it on last night, not much bigger in my field of view than the monitor I'm looking at right now. No, it doesn't matter. It's just beautiful. The cinematography in One Battle After Another absolutely stunned me, and I'm fallen for the VistaVision bullshit. I didn't see it projected that way, obviously, but like, The Brutalist and this are two of the most beautiful movies I've ever seen, and they share very little in terms of cinematography, or at least in terms of like style.
Aside from their use of VistaVision.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, people are like, oh, you see they have the road shots, but the way the cameras are used in the road scenes in both movies are incredibly different. And so it's either they're just two talented filmmakers, or it's magic of the film. It's magic. In any case, I thought that as much as Sean Penn, was center stage with his egregiously ridiculous performance, he did not shock me, because I like you said, Kate, he's not an actor who has cared in a long time, but he has always been a competent actor, and everyone knows it. So that I'm glad that he put in the work, and I'm glad that he performed as well as he did, because he made the character much more believable, I think, than Brock Vaughn would have been just stuck on screen.
Agreed.
Like his use of like mimicking the walking of people like Vince McMahon and Donald Trump, or mimicking like the jaw thing that like those kind of jughead dudes will tend to fall into. It's just excellent. And it's not like I've been paying much attention to the man, but I can't imagine he's on as much HGH normally. So, props to him for, probably hurting his body to some extent. But hey, he nails the look.
He does. Yeah.
Even got the insane barrel belly without any shoulders.
It was his most vascular performance by far.
Yeah. And honestly, I think he might have he might have started using more steroids for the second half of the movie.
Oh yeah, I believe that.
Yeah, I noticed his arms got a lot bigger. Anyway,
specifically that scene where he's sitting there across from Willa, which makes that joke so much funnier when she goes, "Why is your t-shirt so tight?" And his response is just, I'm not gay, if that's what you're asking.
Perfect delivery of that
Yeah.
line. I am not a homosexual. But Chase Infinity, genuinely,
Jesus Christ, yeah.
she was incredible, and like the care that, and the like, her as an actor, her performance was incredible. It was both. It was, I think she nailed Prairie better than I had ever hoped anyone really could nail that kind of, bringing a character from a book onto the screen. Just because there's so much unsaid and so much you have to assume. But at least for the way I read Prairie, she nailed her. And like, between her choices as an actor and Paul Thomas's choices as a director, the way that they depicted like the the trauma that she was experiencing, I thought was both incredibly, as far as I'm aware, accurate, but also sympathetic. Like, there was no bit that felt like, oh, you're watching a girl go crazy. She's out of her mind. She's freaking out. No,
Yeah.
she's doing the rational thing every moment. Every single moment. And that last
Mhm.
scene between her and Leonardo DiCaprio, or not last scene, that one was awesome. But the standoff was, I thought, beautiful for all of those reasons. I was really, and this is weird, on my first viewing, I was really put off by the particular way that the sexuality between Perfidia and Lockjaw were played. It felt a little extreme. I will say, my second viewing, I don't know if it was not knowing Teyana Taylor's face as an actor. I don't know if it was just me being on edge about like how people are going to take the movie, because thinking about how people interpreted Inherent Vice and etc.
Yeah.
I, I was a little concerned, but I on my second viewing, I really felt like they actually nailed the dynamics there. And one of the big things I'll give PTA props for is figuring out a way to actually like slightly rewrite the Frenesi character so that the relationship between her and Bond feels less like, on a surface level, feels less like a misogynistic stereotype.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it's very fair to not read Frenesi as that, but that really impressed me. So yeah, that's how I felt about the movie. I really liked it. I'm not sure if it was the funniest Paul Thomas Anderson movie to me, only because I've slowly come around to the argument that There Will Be Blood is a deeply funny movie, and that one I'm not sure I don't laugh in any scene. Whereas I did cry a few times with One Battle After Another. So that's my take.
Yeah, so I saw the movie twice. I saw it in Dolby on Thursday night, and then I saw it in IMAX 70mm late last night with my mom. I absolutely love the movie. I think it's the movie of the year. It's the movie of the decade. Hopefully, it's not the movie of the century, because I hope that the movie's politics don't define the next 75 years of U.S. history. Yeah, but I do think that the One Battle After Another will win Best Picture, and I if it doesn't, I think it should. But yeah, to echo some stuff that's already been said, I'm a big PTA fanboy. I've a formative movie going experience for me was seeing There Will Be Blood on Super Bowl Sunday in 2008 by myself in the theater. I think it was the first movie that I saw where I like drove to the theater myself and sat by myself and drove home by myself. I think I was 18 at the time, which is a little bit late perhaps for that to happen. But and There Will Be Blood has since then been my favorite movie. I have gone on record already with some friends and on some Discord channels as saying that One Battle After Another might be my new favorite movie. I need to watch it more and maybe watch like There Will Be Blood in 2001 and a few other movies again to kind of figure out what is actually now my new favorite. But it might be new favorite movie. That being said, I was pretty apprehensive about the movie. I mean, right before watching it, me and my buddy were talking that I saw it with. And I was talking about how I've been looking forward to this movie for like a year, like basically since like a year or two, and better not suck and stuff. And he had him and one of my other friends had seen a test screening of it in the spring, and they were both adamant that I would love it, adamant that I would enjoy it. They seemed 100% sure that I would enjoy the movie, and I was skeptical. Like some of the other co-hosts, I really hated Licorice Pizza. Like it's one of my least favorite movies, probably, for a few different reasons. So I was pretty apprehensive going into it, and I mean, I wasn't expecting. It had about as much Vineland as I was expecting. Actually, I will say that. From the trailers, just from everything, it didn't seem like it would be at all one-to-one adaptation. That seemed, pretty clear to I think pretty much everyone that it wasn't going to be like a straight adaptation. I do think that Paul Thomas Anderson did a really good job of stealing some stuff and adding in a bunch of new stuff. Yeah, I mean, I think my favorite role in the movie was probably Regina Hall, who plays I think her name's Deandra in the movie. She really stood out to me as capturing. Just like she captured a lot of like raw, pure emotion. The scene near the end where she's crying and she doesn't know where Bob is and she wants to help. She wants to get Willa out of the situation that she's in, but she can't. That scene is amazing. I thought she kind of stole the movie in some ways. I don't dislike Leonardo DiCaprio as an actor. I also don't really like him too much as an actor. I thought he did a pretty good job. I'm not sold on it being like a best lead actor performance necessarily. But he does a lot with what he's given, and Regina Hall and Benicio del Toro are probably the two performances that I focus on the most after I watch the movie in terms of the quality. Benicio del Toro plays like this ultra, like he's kind of ultra cool in a lot of ways. He's ultra connected. He's just super cool under pressure. I really liked his role. One thing we haven't talked about that I think Kate mentioned in the group chat was how Pynchonian the Christmas Adventurers thing is.
Oh my god!
Absolutely.
Yeah. I had that same thought whenever I was watching it. But I think we're all on the same page with that being super Pynchonian and funny. I was the only one laughing in the theater whenever the first time I saw it, whenever Sean Penn is like grabs Willa and is like, "I'm a Christmas adventurer."
Yeah.
I thought that was really, really funny, and no one else laughed. The second time I saw it, people did laugh at that line, which was good. If I have any criticisms of the movie, I do think that the last like 10 minutes. They're pretty like the Seaman Demon line got the biggest laugh out of any line in the movie. I think the second time I saw it, and it is funny, and I do like how heartfelt the very end is with the letter from Perfidia to Willa, and Willa kind of going off and not leading, but going to a protest and kind of continuing the fight and stuff. It's just Sean Penn's character didn't have to survive the car crash. I mean, I don't know. That's why my one small nitpick. It didn't ruin the movie at all. I still think it's a near perfect movie. But I don't think that much would have been lost if they just cut it after Willa and Bob reconnect after the big car chase and all the car accidents and her shooting the assassin and stuff. Yeah, I mean overall though, like I said, it might be my new favorite movie. It's nearly perfect. It's kinetic. It's it did not feel like 2.5 hours. It felt like maybe an hour and a half. It flew by quickly. I've never seen a movie that combines like action and thriller tropes with like art and our sensibility like that movie does. I could go on for a long time about how much I love that movie, but I'll stop myself. But yeah, just to summarize, I absolutely love the movie, and I do think it will stand the test of time as the defining movie of this year and this decade, probably.
Yeah. Well, and I think that you put it probably better than I did, in the sense that when I had mentioned how accessible this felt from his filmography, that's really what I meant, is like his ability to blend the art house elements with the action and thriller tropes is really impressive in a way that I think makes it so supremely accessible. I guess before we kind of talk about it as an adaptation of Vineland, is there any elements of the film that like someone wants to specifically talk about, or specific moments that they really loved? For me, I know that the Pynchonian character of the Christmas tree adventure thing is certainly the best depiction I think I've seen, not just necessarily of like a Pynchonian kind of the powers that be. It certainly is that, but also just conceptually, that idea of a capital T they is really, really sold with that organization in that moment where the guy who will eventually become like the assassin later in the film goes over to that house, goes into the basement, and then opens up a door in the basement to like an underground complex of like who knows how many like rooms. It's this big like sloping hallway. Like that moment, and then that moment at the end where they go to like an office building that they own, is two of these cases where like the Pynchonian capital T they has this element of almost Lovecraftian horror to it, of just like, if you think about it too long, or if you stare at its existence, the implication of it is like so horrifying. And like the implication of that entire underground bunker or complex like is horrifying to me. Like there was really a moment in the film when he was walking towards, eventually what is just a pretty banal sort of meeting between four of them, where I was like, oh God, like what is going on behind all of those doors? Like how like what is this space used for? It really sold that kind of deeply kind of horrific element that is present in a lot of Pynchon's writing when it comes to sort of the powers that be, or that capital T they, that I really, really appreciated seeing depicted. And then especially with the way the film ends, like I do agree with you, Luke, that Lockjaw doesn't need to survive the car crash. I did laugh incredibly hard when I saw him walk over the like ridge line and his face is covered in blood, but he's still doing that crazy walk. Yeah. And then to see how absolutely fucked up his face is. And to have him get gassed to death at his own office, I feel like is a fitting end to his character. But that in and of itself is another sort of option for PTA to show the power of this organization, of just like, yeah, they have the ability to like not only have an office, but they can like run poison gas into your office, and they have people like ready to go to clean up.
And a crematorium on site.
Yeah, exactly. Like all of those elements really sell like the true horror of what this organization is. They're like, as bad as the actual like immigration enforcement and all of that is, like there is a greater evil that you don't even really get a chance to look at any point in the film. And I think that is a really, really Pynchonian idea. The other special mention I want to give is to the guy who is Lockjaw's like chief interrogator.
Oh my God.
That guy fucking killed it. That's exactly how those people talk. And every single scene that he came up, I was like, this just feels like a real interrogation that I'm watching with one of these, immigrations and customs enforcement and all that. And so in looking it up, I learned that the reason why is he's actually a technical consultant, and he used to work for the Department of Homeland Security. So, like, that guy's not even an actor.
He's just doing his job.
He's just doing what he used to do for employment. But it's really impressive that Paul Thomas Anderson probably hired that guy just to be like, how do these kind of things typically go? And then just chose put him in the movie.
Like an Arlie Ermy situation in
yeah,
Fullmetal Jacket,
essentially. Yeah,
I
really
want
great.
to piggyback on two of your things there, the accessibility and then also the Christmas Adventurers Club, because, and I'll start with the latter. And what I wanted to mention was that in addition to being this sort of, as you described it, as we've talked about on the show before, this sort of Lovecraftian entity that they are, of this immense unknowable power that really and truly does have such wide reaching tentacles all over not just the country but the world. It is almost incomprehensible to think how much influence and power that kind of group has, and that it's even a real thing, because that's kind of the most disturbing aspect of it, is that it's not just a a good villain to have for movies. That's a real, that shit exists. We just can't fathom how much it exists. But the other side of that coin is how wildly absurd and bizarrely naive those people are. When you have the whole like reverse rape thing, and like they just can't wrap their heads around certain concepts, but that's how those people operate. Like they live in such an insulated and bizarrely warped mindset that they almost don't really seem to understand the world as it is. They can only see the world as they want it to be. And so there's almost a really comical aspect to it, to see just how detached they really are. But then it comes back around to the horror of all that, of these are the people who have a lot of power in the world. They're really truly that inept and that out of touch. But they're the ones that are pulling all the strings behind the scenes. And that's part of just what ramps up that sort of cosmic dread of the whole thing. The other thing with the accessibility, I think this is, I agree with everybody so far who said that this is PTA's most accessible film. And I think a lot of people's knee-jerk reaction to where should you start with PTA would almost always be There Will Be Blood. But I think they forget that that is very much more an art house film than it seems. I think for people who really enjoy PTA, it checked a lot of those boxes of a PTA art house film, but it was also very much, it was a Western, it was a thriller, it was a Treasure of the Sierra Madre kind of conspiracy kind of thing. But it's also a film that starts with 30 minutes of no dialogue. Maybe not 30 minutes. It's a significant amount of time where there is no talking, and it's just one dude blowing himself almost up, trying to get, mining, and there's so little going on dialogue wise in that film that it's not going to hold a lot of people's attention. Yeah, there are scenes that will grab a viewer's attention and that will hold them, but it's really not a film that I think a lot of people who are not used to Paul Thomas Anderson's directorial style and writing style are really going to hold on to. I think with everything else that he's done, it's either, you have the bankability of someone like Adam Sandler in Punch Drunk Love, but that movie's weird as hell. But it's really good. I love that movie. It's maybe the best romantic comedy I've ever seen. But it's weird as hell. And it's got this really jarring percussive soundtrack that could be really off-putting to a lot of people. And then, Boogie Nights is a fantastic found family story, but it's also about porn. And so that can, upset a lot of people and be uncomfortable for a lot of people to watch. There's so many things within his filmography that are, there's a lot of good. Then there's Licorice Pizza. And then it's hard to really find one film of his that a lot of people can find something to really pull them into. But this one does that. It has a lot of action. It has a lot of comedy. It has a lot of heart. It has incredibly shot scenes. That car chase scene at the end was one of the most tense movie-going experiences I've ever had. Like every time we roll over a hill, it's like being on a roller coaster. And I really, really enjoyed that. Like I tend to not like car chase scenes in movies too much because they almost always feel like either they're like Bullet, or they're trying to emulate Bullet, or they're going Fast and Furious where it's just completely over the top and, balls to the wall kind of thing. But this one, there was such a almost claustrophobic feel to it because you're not in the car. The camera's just, mounted on the front of the car, so that you have your only perspective is just the road. And that sort of up and down of it all it was such a really tense scene to have. And then to have those multiple stops along the way of, Lockjaw's character running into the guy from Christmas Adventurers Club, and then, why can't I think of Leonardo DiCaprio's Bob, coming up on Lockjaw, and then him coming up to Willa, and the final scene, like there was just the tension just kept ratcheting and ratcheting and ratcheting, and it's such a masterful use of that directorial style that he has. And then to kind of touch on the performances before we go into the adaptation side of things. Sean Penn, phenomenal. I agree with you guys. I haven't been keeping up with a lot of movies lately, and that's just part of everything going on in my world. But it definitely has felt like he's been phoning it in for a long time. But goddamn, he was incredible in this. Benicio del Toro, I always enjoy him, and I think everyone was perfectly cast for this film. Chase Infinity is the one that stole it for me. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but this is the first film she has done, and I think she only has one TV credit to her name outside of that.
Yeah, it's her debut.
And holy shit, like I have to keep up with her career now because she was phenomenal. And if she does not get an Oscar nod for her performance, I have no faith in that system. I already have very little faith in that system, but it's incredible how powerful and gripping and real her performance felt throughout that film.
Yeah, agreed 100%.
I would like to expound just a little bit on both of what you, Cody, and what you, Kate, have just said. Basically, so just working in reverse, that very last car chase sequence with the three of them, and especially the pileup, you could write a thesis just doing like very straightforward, like symbolic readings of the different, like the ways each of them were driving and the cars they were driving.
Yeah,
like it was so dense and so like, and it's not all that meaningful. It's all stuff that if you're paying attention to the movie, you're not going to miss it, or you're not going to miss it if you don't take the time to sort through the symbolism. But I think just a really nice piece de resistance on a movie. But also like to kind of get at that exact dichotomy between the Christmas Adventurers Club, within the Christmas Adventurers Club, that weird duality of them being totally like obviously insanely stupid, because like why, from the standpoint of rational like labor management, which is kind of what they're doing. The labor is the coercion of power in a broad sense. Colonel Lockjaw there sure seems like a soldier. Sure seems like he'd be very helpful. But he's just too gross because he had sex with a black woman.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so obviously stupid that I think it really it defangs the racism to an extent, which not in a way that like it does, but it makes it less of like a gag and makes it more clear that like, oh no, they are so racist, they're stupid.
Yeah.
But like and that's actually kind of symbolized in the walk down to the meeting, out in wherever the hell in New England that was. Because like you go into a normal, like essentially a mansion that verges on McMansion in styling, with a normal, hospitable housewife who's there to greet people and usher them in, and go downstairs, and you see this beautiful pastoral thing, which is like somewhat disguised in the grain of the wood in the door that you go through. So it's like all that very silly, white supremacist nonsense about like the old way being all in that pastoral scene of the wood grain painting. And then you go through the door, and it's white, and it's curved, and it goes straight, and there's endless doors, or at least it feels that way to us. And then he goes through the door, and it's just a goddamn office.
Yeah.
It's just some schmuck who put up a diorama of hunting grouse in his office. It's just a mid-century douchebag's office, and that's what all the preamble was for these three schmucks sitting in a room talking about how scared they are of someone having sex with a black woman.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really good. You don't see movies that take racism as ridiculously as it inherently is without reducing the seriousness of what it does.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's multiple elements of that conversation that do that. Like when they're talking about the indigenous guy that's like tracking people for them, and multiple of them mention like, oh, it's too bad he's not homegrown.
Yeah.
And it's just coming after they name like two different Native American tribes that he might be from. That's just another element of how intelligently written those racist elements of it are to do exactly what you've mentioned, Will.
I would like to raise the question. It feels very pointed that the non-binary character was the one who gave Will's number.
Will's number, yeah.
Yeah, and it might not be pointed. It totally could just be, for some reason, this being the one choice that Paul Thomas Anderson didn't think about. But it really is it an overture on the kind of older Gen X idea of like, oh, these kids are just too frivolous? Is it like, are we supposed to interpret them more symbolically?
I was thinking about that after the movie ended and I was driving home, and I there's a part of me that thinks that it's just that one of those friends was bound to be the one to crack. And I think that by trying to look really into it and see like, is there a specific reason it was that character and not one of the other ones? The reality of the matter is, if no matter which of them it had been, that question would still be coming up. Like, was it her girlfriend because she's a girl, or was it her boyfriend because he's Hispanic, or like that kind of thing would have come up, I think, regardless of which of them did it. I think the idea is just that one of them was bound to crack, and maybe because I know they cut scenes for this after the test screening, and I'm curious if maybe there was a scene in there where that character was pressed a little harder on. Maybe the interrogator was like leveraging, oh, like, your family doesn't know about this part of you, and we can expose that and harm you with that kind of thing, and that's just not there anymore, so we lost that context. I don't know, but I think that regardless, one of those friends was going to crack and give up that number, one way or the other.
Yeah, that's what I would think if it weren't for the fact that out of the four friends who got interrogated, the one who cracked was the one we didn't get to see pressed at all. Well, there were two who didn't get pressed.
Well, they did imply they were arresting them.
Oh, absolutely, but that was the implication for all of them, and so like they got the least, that friend got the least pressure, except for the skinny blonde one.
I mean, I can say that, speaking as someone in a gender minority, I've only mentioned it a couple times on the podcast, but I'm an intersex person who is technically transgender because I've transitioned from what my birth certificate initially said, for medical necessity reasons. There is something inherent to interactions like that I would say, especially with the world being the way that it is currently, that has an additional element of fear to it, because if you extrapolate out from what might happen to that individual when they get arrested, there's really no good answers for what happens to them in jail. There's also no good answers for what happens to them like afterwards, especially in the wake of the federal government saying that trans people may be designated as a terrorist group. To me, the kind of takeaway that I had from that is like, I don't know, the stakes are high for everyone in that situation, but there is something in particular, being the person that I am, who's especially like my vocal intonation doesn't necessarily match my gender, biological or otherwise, very well, where it feels like the stakes are a bit higher for what might happen to me after that conversation takes place. And if I do end up being sent to a prison or a federal detention center or something like that. Do I know for certain that Paul Thomas Anderson was thinking about that? No. I would be interested if there is any sort of additional sort of deleted scenes or material around that. But that was how I felt about it, where I can understand, like, from that character's perspective, what's going to happen to me if I am sent to whatever facility this department of the government handles. I don't know, So, yeah, I don't think it's a Gen X thing. I think that it's either just Paul Thomas Anderson had to pick one of them, or if he was doing some deeper political thinking, especially with how constantly trans people have been maligned in the news for the past 5 years, that I could see him extrapolating something out from that as well.
That makes a lot of sense. Thanks for bringing that point to the center. That makes sense.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, that character probably had the most to lose and probably would have had the hardest time being incarcerated. So,
yeah, that makes sense.
All right. Any other thoughts on aspects of the movie or scenes or performances that we for sure want to talk about before we talk about it as an adaptation?
The last thing I had thought about was just to clarify right up front, so no one starts thinking midway through my question that I don't understand it. I do understand the meaning of Willa saying his lifts are showing. I do also understand that the reason Vince McMahon walks the way he does is because he wears lifts. And I really wonder, especially the second viewing, I thought I saw something weird about his feet going into the incinerator. I wonder, was he actually just wearing lifts? Because that would make sense and would make that line even funnier.
I don't know. I'd have to. There was definitely something weird about his walk, and I didn't know if that was just a choice that Sean Penn made, or if that was in the script of, like, he's got lifts in his shoes and that's what's doing that. I didn't think about that, so I'm gonna have to pay attention to that next time I see it.
This is maybe not super relevant, but I do know that Ron DeSantis wears lifted shoes.
Yes, I have seen evidence of that.
Oh yeah, same.
Just wear high heels.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And you also get the added benefit of strengthening your calf.
Yeah.
And you can ride horses a little easier.
Yeah, that's true. You're used to posting. Yeah, I think the last thing that I wanted to shout out too is Benicio del Toro's, not just his performance, but specifically the interplay that he has with Bob, where the entire time that the two of them are together, Bob is like losing his mind and paranoia, and Benicio del Toro could not be cooler about things.
The line,
which was
when he's trying to remember the what time is it? He's just like 8:15.
Yeah. There was part of me that was really hoping that Bob would actually hear that, say it, and then that somehow it would just be correct. And
yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
It's revealed that he's actually sort of, connected to all of that. But the way that the film unfolds, specifically from the time that the whole tactical unit arrives in Bactan Cross to Bob getting arrested, like that whole sort of escalation that takes place is such a genius kind of set piece from Paul Thomas Anderson. And the ways in which you get to see that there is like this whole underground world that even Bob is not aware of, in the way that the camera takes you from the dojo to the convenience store to the like shelter above the convenience store to the apartments. And through it, he's just sort of like, oh yeah, here's this person, and he's like coordinating people's movements and all of that. It's just so amazingly shot and done, and Benicio del Toro plays it so well. And it also very cleverly kind of gives the audience a break when Bob is on the phone. That doubles as not just the comedic relief of him absolutely reaming out the guy on the other end, but then also it's just sort of this like pause from what had been continuous momentum and shouting for like 20 minutes, in a way that I think is just good filmmaking. And that particular sequence, that whole, reveal of, I believe Benicio del Toro called it a Latino Harriet Tubman situation.
Yeah.
The whole like steady reveal of that was something that stuck with me, but then most strongly stuck with my partner who I saw it with. Like that was the standout sort of sequence of the film for her. And yeah, it's just another just great element of an overall great story.
Well, thank you for bringing that up, because you reminded me of the one thing I really wanted to bring up about the movie itself. That I thought that the choice to like essentially center the theme of the movie on the dichotomy between people who are, and it's not necessarily like dedicated to the revolution, but people who are dedicated to the revolution as a phrase, like that's who they are. They're dedicated to the revolution, versus people who do revolution, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because like fundamentally what we kind of see in the form of Bob is this man who feels like he's been cut out of everything that he was part of, and can't get over this essentially ex of his, who feels both deeply, like they've demonstrated it in the movie, and hopefully we can assume that he is, based on Zoid, deeply loves his daughter and does care for her, but feels like his life has been cut short, and so he is just living in this bubble of paranoia because he feels like he's on the run, and he is. But all of these other people who are on the run in a much more immediate way do live their normal lives and do choose to integrate their normal lives into these protocols. And it is something that is in the original book and is clearly seen through like the fact that Perfidia's parents say, hey, you are not you aren't part of this culture, you don't quite get it.
Yeah.
And it's so small because it feels like it's just like oh, you're not right for my daughter kind of thing. But no, it is. He doesn't quite get it. He is a newcomer to this, and he didn't have the time to internalize the principles of the thing. Whereas the other guy who's running the radio station down in Tijuana, El Paso, wherever it was supposed to be set, because it was shot in El Paso. But whichever, running this radio station is going about his life normally when he has just as much to risk as Bob, minus a daughter, which, to be fair, pretty big. But that's one of those things that's in the book, but only if you really dig for it. And in the movie, I was worried that it wouldn't come through at all, and Paul Thomas Anderson did an incredible job of demonstrating it in every way, on every level.
Yeah, agreed.
I do also like, just kind of on that note, the fact that I believe at one point during that scene, it might have been a little bit earlier, that Benicio del Toro's character referred to Bob as the Gringo Zapata, which
so
was
good,
fucking hilarious. Just such an offhanded little comment about it. It was so perfect.
Yep. Building off of your very conveniently given segue in how Paul Thomas Anderson has adapted an element of Vineland into his script, what do we think about this film as an adaptation of Vineland?
So, like I said at the top of this, I'm not trying to like make a braggadocious claim here, but I can be checked on this if I'm wrong, but I've pretty certain all of us have been saying since this was announced that this would be the only way this would work is to be a very loose adaptation of Vineland. There's too much of Vineland itself that is almost unadaptable, which is something that kind of comes up. That's one of those words that gets used a lot for a lot of different books and other media that people want to see adapted. And then there's always the conversations that you see about like, well, who would be good at adapting this book, or who would be good at adapting this or that. And I think some things are just better left as their original form. But I do think that if it comes down to it, I think there's a greater chance of success in loosely adapting something like this, because the formats in which they're being presented are so vastly different, and that makes the storytelling itself different, because the structure of the storytelling between a book and a film is so radically different that you can't expect to have a one-to-one on that. It just doesn't work like that. A book that reads like a film is almost never going to feel very good as a book, and a film that is shot like a book is never going to work as a film. So you always are kind of sacrificing something in doing this, and this is a really good example of how to do a loose adaptation. To take the bones of the story, to take the thematic concepts, to take the heart of the story and keep that intact, but build this whole new world around it, these new characters that are really, if anything, just kind of avatars of their book counterpart, or in some cases they're amalgamations of different characters within the book. It allows you to create a stronger story in the other medium that you're making. So there's just, like I said, too many parts of Vineland that I don't think can be adapted to film, the Thanatoids being the biggest part. I cannot think of a good way to do that. Are there ways to do it? Probably, yeah. You could do this real straightforward kind of weird thing of just literally having them there, but it's going to feel stilted. It's going to feel off. You're never going to get the right resonance because there's too much of that is a literary construct and can't really be put into a film. That's also, I think, where the idea of doing animation versus live action kind of comes into play. Like, I think most Pynchon would, if it were to be adapted, would benefit from being animated. I think this particular book suits live action better, and this is why what we have now is one battle after another. It's the shifting. I remember we talked about it, and I think I said at one point that I was worried that shifting it forward was not going to work because the political undertones that were being discussed in Vineland, while still present, weren't present in the same way. But the decision to shift it from what it was in Vineland to the current immigration crisis and the treatment of immigrants and anyone who really isn't white is the perfect way to go about this. And I think that was smart of P.T. Anderson to kind of hold off on making this film until now, because those social aspects have finally, I wish they hadn't. I'd rather not have the film and not have the issues that the film is talking about than have the film and the issues. But this is the perfect film to explore those themes in a way that I think a lot of people who are on the outside of it and maybe aren't really paying attention or just kind of putting blinders onto it can really come away from the film with more of an understanding and maybe more inclination to understand it better and do something and try to make some changes. I think that there's such a revolutionary spirit that exists in the film and in the book that it will get people hopefully to kind of move forward and sort of get out of the stagnation of everything going on and the distractions. Whereas, in Vineland, it was the TV. The TV was the ultimate distraction. The TV was what was being used to keep the populace complacent, to keep people just stagnant and not wanting to move forward. it's social media, it's cell phones in one battle after another. So the technology itself has changed, but the use of it by the government, the use of it by the powers that be is unchanged. And to kind of circle all this back around, I think that the reason this film works as an adaptation is because it is a loose adaptation. And the choice to list it in the credits as inspired by rather than adapted from or based on is the right way to go about that.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm most kind of shocked by in terms of like the how is it as an adaptation conversation is just how much it doesn't deviate, because it is absolutely the different story. It's absolutely not the same characters. You know, you don't have DL because sure, Deandra's vaguely a stand-in, but not really. She's a very different character.
Mm-hmm.
And same goes for Sensei versus Shiro or whoever else you think he's standing in for. I guess you could argue Hector, but that would be weird.
Yeah.
But it the way I've been talking about it to friends is that it's all of the character dynamics are basically the same as in the book, with the noted exception of the Frenzy / Perfidia and Vaughn / Lockjaw relationship.
Mm-hmm.
But every other relationship is basically the exact same dynamic, and all of the themes are, if not the same, they are essentially, slightly pared down or refocused rather than changed. And in that way, this might be like the most honest adaptation of a movie I've ever seen. I can't think of anything that's really better. I guess you could say one of the Charlotte's Web movies, because in case anyone didn't read the book but has seen the movies, either the animated or the live action animated one. It's the same story in both of them, same message in both of them, but frankly, I can't think of anything else. Because, like Inherent Vice, I like it as a movie. I got gripes, though. It cuts out so much of what I think is the value of Inherent Vice as a book. Whereas One Battle After Another, there's nothing missing from what I love about it, except for the stuff that is purely, like, literary. And I don't mean that in like a byword pretentious sense. I mean that in the sense that, like, it's a book and it's made of words. But beyond that, I honestly think it's a perfect adaptation. The only issue is that I do think that moving the timeline forward makes it very difficult for people who aren't relatively well educated about the 60s to understand what the hell is going on in the initial, like, French 75 revolution. And honestly, I think it just comes down to people these days not knowing anything about the true revolutionary side of the hippie movement, not knowing anything about the Great Refusal as such, not understanding the idea of this, like, the universal hierarchy being toppled in a combined revolution, just because of how many people I've seen online saying, what the hell were they fighting for? Which is only vague if you have no clue about the real life radical motives outside of, like, oh, it's a guy in a TV show or a movie who talks about the revolution like it's going to happen. What a joke. So that's not sure if that's an issue on the part of Paul Thomas Anderson, that people are so afraid of breaking social rules that they don't understand that these things connect. But it's a bit of a problem for the accessibility, at least.
To go back to Inherent Vice, I've seen Inherent Vice like 4 or 5 times, maybe more. I love that movie. But Inherent Vice does kind of show the problems you would have with trying to do a straight adaptation of a Pynchon novel. Where, that movie, I love that movie, but it doesn't make sense to people. I've tried to show it to people, and it like people will be like 20, 30 minutes in, and they'll make me stop the movie, and they'll be like, "What the fuck is going on?" And I'll ask,
Yep.
I'll ask like, "Do you mean that in a good way or a bad way?" And they mean like in a bad way. Like I don't want to watch this movie. Well, there's so much context you need, and stuff. That being said, I do love Inherent Vice, but I don't know how I would feel about it if I'd never read Pynchon. But Inherent Vice, one of my main takeaways from one of my later viewings of the movie was not that it's like some great adaptation of Inherent Vice, the novel, but that it really captures Pynchon's worldview as espoused in his oeuvre and his novels. And I do think that One Battle After Another is another good example of that, where a lot has changed from Vineland, but the spirit remains the same, which is kind of what Will was just getting at. But it does. There are kind of small elements of Gravity's Rainbow, like there's the banana pancakes are mentioned at one point.
Mhm.
One of Leo's nicknames is Rocket Man. Where it does, and Against the Day. In some ways, this movie is inspired by Against the Day, I would say, because it depicts revolutionaries using violence to as a means to a revolutionary end, which is a big thing in Against the Day. We've already covered some of that stuff, but it continues to be a pretty massive theme in that book throughout the rest of it. So much so that I recently read some Pynchon scholarship that really zeroed in on the Against Today's supposed views on revolutionary violence and whether or not it's a good thing or a bad thing. But yeah, just to kind of summarize, like I was saying, Paul Thomas Anderson does seem to understand Pynchon and Pynchon's worldview, at least as Pynchon's worldview as you can extrapolate it out of his novels, in a way that I'm very impressed by, and that I can't think of anyone else who would adapt the themes so well. I mean, and he's not from Paul Thomas Anderson's other movies. It's not like you watch them and you're like, oh, like this guy has to direct a Pynchon novel, an adaptation of a Pynchon novel. But whenever he's done it, he's done such an amazing job, in my opinion, of capturing the spirit of what Pynchon is going for throughout his books.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. Inherent Vice is a film that I think it would take your average person with no connection with the source material probably 4 or 5 watches to like fully concretely understand the whole interconnected plot of it. And I agree with you, both Will and Luke, in that it's not necessarily a great adaptation of the story in the novel, but especially with what you said, Luke, that worldview, and those certain aspects of the world itself that he created in that book, I think it does really well. I think that watching that movie kind of makes me feel like I'm in that world in a really solid way. And I think, but largely the brilliance of that film, at least for me anyway, comes about through the performances and through what he does choose to analyze, which is kind of the idea that there is no ethical consumption in capitalism and that everything is sort of deeply entwined, interconnected in unethical ways is the element of that book that he chose to kind of pull out and adapt rather than the whole context of it. I think it succeeds in that. And that people can at least come up with that kind of understanding. But I would also agree that the spirit of Vineland as a novel and the important thematic aspects that make up the core of that book are certainly present in this movie in ways that are very impressive in the way that he was able to make that work. And yeah, I mean, like Cody had mentioned, there's no way to, I think, do the Thanatoids in a modern sense. Certainly not in live action, I don't think. Obviously, the other elements of the book that you're not really going to see an adaptation of would be the Godzilla stuff, and some of the more cartoonishly evil aspects of Brock Vond. I agree that him as a character just put on the screen maybe wouldn't work quite as well. And I think the other thing too that I have to give special shout out to is like the name of stuff, not just the Christmas Tree Adventure Society, but also, you know, there's a guy in this movie whose name is William Throckmorton.
Yep.
You know, even something like Perfidia Beverly Hills, where like that name is maybe kind of goofy on the surface, but then Perfidia is being pulled from perfidy, which has to do with betrayal. So like even the Pynchonian aspect of how you name your characters is present in the film. I was hoping Bodhidharma Pizza would get a mention when they were giving out the different like business names, but even though it didn't, the business names he does come up with are very Pynchonian. So, you know, a lot of the kind of like set dressing of his novels is also worked in here in a way that's really entertaining. But yeah, I think I would still love to see just an adaptation of the chapter 9 of just the People's Republic of Rock and Roll storyline from Vineland. That's a self-contained movie that you could make about, you know, the evil of COINTELPRO. But you know, that sort of pipe dream aside, I do think that this is probably the best you could do to take those elements out of the book, to take those themes and the intents that Pynchon was writing towards, and make it accessible to a modern day audience. The change of kind of political struggle, or at least the focus of the political struggle, is so smart, and the changes that he made, I think, were necessary to get the point across to the modern viewer, right? Without having them need to read a 400-page, you know, postmodern novel. And I think it succeeds. I think the fact that so many people have commented on the politics and on the meaning of this film in reviews and in sort of columns about it showcases that he was very successful in synthesizing those elements out of the book and putting them on the page. There was a random like TikTok that I saw that was clipped and then put on Reddit of someone asking Paul Thomas Anderson how long it took him to write the script, and his like deadpan response to them was 20 years. Which, I mean, part of that is obviously trying to first adapt Vineland and then failing and then going back over it and everything, right? So but I think it's also very true in that he's been thinking about how to do this for a very, very long time. And in the intentional way in which it's crafted, not just as a piece of filmmaking, which all of that is certainly there, as we've talked about, but also from the thematic intent. I think showcases someone who has a deep understanding of the source material, and showcases someone who understands how to communicate those ideas to a modern audience. Is the story the same? No. You know, the story as far as what specifically happens page by page to minute by minute in the film, it's probably 25% the same. But he's still able to communicate the ideas to a much more complete degree than Inherent Vice. Inherent Vice is a slim. The movie is a slim portion of the book, and that is not necessarily the case here. Which was really quite a nice surprise. I don't think that I was expecting that. I think I was expecting more of a straightforward, you know, man tries to get his daughter back kind of story without as much detail or theme behind that.
Well, and there's also to touch back to the thematics of it being there, and you know, you talked about how chapter 9 itself could have been a whole film, and you're 100% correct in that. But I think there were little allusions to those kind of things that were scattered throughout the film. There was the one scene in which the protesters were lined up against the police squad that were getting ready to go back and try to, you know, push them back and everything. But they basically needed that reason, and they had their plant come in, get dropped off in, you know, attire looking like he's one of the protesters with the carrying a Molotov cocktail.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly this nonviolent resistance turns into a violent struggle because they managed to insert someone in there to escalate the situation, to give them the power that they needed to take over everything and do all this. So it's there's little things that are peppered throughout the film, and I'm gonna have to go back and obviously see it again and again to kind of catch more of them. But that one stood out to me in that first viewing. I was like, that's a really good way to subtly place that in there without having to spend a lot of time building on that. I think the only thing, if I had to really find something about it that I wish there was more of, it would be Perfidia. I think part of what made the book so compelling was all of Furnessi's backstory and getting to know more of her situation and why she did what she did, why she turned on the cause, and why she was involved with Brock. Obviously, parts of that I don't think you can really translate to film, and the other side of that is that it would make a 2.5 hour, 2 hour, 45-minute film 3:15 probably. But I do think that was an element that I kind of wish there was a little bit more of, was to get to know her character a little bit better. I think what was done right with her is showing. I think the film does a really good job, and Pynchon's novels do too, of showing that it's not just a one-sided issue, that one side's right and one side's wrong. It's that you have these two conflicting sides that are so absorbed in themselves that they can't get out of their own way as a result. So with Perfidia, she's so wrapped up in just being a revolutionary. It doesn't necessarily matter what she's revolting against. She just has to constantly be doing that. And that causes her to kind of have these reactions in the way that she does that end up putting her in the situation that puts her into. So it's that sort of like selfishness that, when she's leaving the house and Bob's like, we have a child. We have this kid now. Like, you can't keep doing this. You have to be here for your daughter. And she's pushing back on him and, like, you're not letting me do what I need to do. And I come first and that, this, that, and the other. I wanted more of that, more of her mindset, more of her rationale for doing the things that she did. But I understand the reason that, you can't really have something like that. So,
yeah, I would agree with that. That is maybe the one critique I have, is her disappearance from the. I get it, right? For the same reason that you've articulated, I think it would have made it much longer. And that scene between Bob and her that you've just articulated really does sell what it needs to. But I would have liked more of her for sure.
Yeah, that kind of segues into an interesting part of the adaptation that I'm not sure how I feel about it. One of those like literary aspects that I was referring to earlier as missing from the movie is kind of the use of time in the book, because it's, as I made a lot of in our coverage of the book, it's almost like an exercise in the idea of past as pretext, and it's basically impossible to have the kind of adaptation that would be able to portray it the way it's portrayed in the book. But I was wondering how y'all felt about the way that time was depicted in the movie, because I was kind of shocked in the way that time was used, because that opening act, it's just constant. It's just adrenaline, and when it's not adrenaline, it's abject horror, and when it's not abject horror or adrenaline, it is just momentum, I guess. And like, it seems like at the very beginning, Perfidia is just meeting Ghetto Pat, as she names him. But by the end of their relationship, it does seem like they've actually been together for a significant amount of time. And of course, this is a revolutionary act, and that all might have taken place in like 6 months, and they still might have had a significant impact on culture and the news and stuff. But then, you have that time jump, and you mentioned earlier Sean Penn's possible increase in steroids. But I don't know, something about the way that time's passage was portrayed struck me as odd, and I can't quite pin it down.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. That there was definitely a part of me in the theater sitting there where I was thinking like, "Whew, how long are we going to be doing this for?" Um, and I think if I was to guess, it was just a matter of practicality, of like to get to that needle drop of dirty work by Steely Dan, which kind of represents the movie becoming the movie it's going to be for the rest of the time. Um, there's just so much of that backstory that just needs to happen just for you to be able to exist in the rest of the film. Um, so I think to me anyway, it speaks of a directorial choice out of just, this is just how I have to cut this in order to, get the audience the details that they absolutely need contextually, and kind of moving on from there, because without that, you're kind of left with the choice of either, am I going to make a 3.5 hour long film, which I'm sure PTA would be fine with, but maybe Warner Brothers would not have been, or you have to look at splitting it and into two, and I think that would have been a kind of not as feasible of a task.
That makes sense. I guess it's really the technique to me that was both impressive but also kind of jarring, and not in a way that I think was intended. Just the way that, not necessarily the
Yeah.
time jump, but the way that time affected the characters. It felt incredibly fluid, which to some extent felt like a nod to the book. But like in that dirty work scene, you actually have like cross-cutting across 3 different moments of time, all basically being portrayed linearly from the previous, or sorry, leading up to the dirty work scene. You have like 3 different moments in time that are distinct, like separated by months, if not years.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And it's odd. It's odd to do that, I guess.
Yeah, it definitely is difficult, and I wonder if it isn't just that the editor, the team that was working on the edit, just that was the best they could come up with to kind of bridge that gap of information, but also propelling it forward in time. Um, it even thinking about how you could re-edit it, or like what might be an option, is making my brain kind of spin around in circles. And
Absolutely,
that's
yeah.
yeah, and that's coming as someone who's like has edited, in scare quotes, in the sense that I used to make shitty movies with my friends in high school that I edited on like Sony Vegas. Um and yeah, I could not imagine trying to do that kind of storytelling through that way of editing, or how to improve that. It's quite crazy.
The last thing from the book that I think is lacking in the adaptation is the portrayal of television, and obviously we don't live in the same culture today that we did in the 80s when it comes to the whole like ad blockers and stuff movement kind of coming up around that time. But it seems like the substitution, like Cody mentioned, was to use smartphones. And what's weird about that substitution is that in the book, television is exclusively a negative thing, other than being entertaining. It's like a source of comedy, but it's a source of comedy that even the characters who are most revolutionary are like, well, this is sucking my soul out, but it sure is fun to watch. Um, and yet in the movie, cell phones are almost never depicted as either a time suck or as a propaganda tool. Instead, it seems like it's been transmuted into more of an infrastructure kind of thing rather than media, as a concept. And I felt like that was odd because it does leave quite a bit on the table.
Well, I do think it's kind of there with because Leo's character is watching that 60s movie, The Battle for Algiers, whenever Willa goes off to the dance. And that movie is, about, I haven't watched it. I did see some references online to that movie being about a revolution. So, Ghetto Pat, used to do revolutionary things, set off bombs and all this stuff. And now he just watches the revolution, depictions of the revolution on TV.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's not like obviously that's a pretty small aspect of the movie and it's a very small detail. But I do think it's that small scene could be a nod to the depiction of TV in Vineland.
Yeah, and if the like we've said, there's so much in the book you can't pack it all in. So if that's all that made it through, that's plenty. I do find it funny though just to have that substitution because it does tie into that whole like, okay, sure, it is technically theoretically ideal to not be using cell phones during this chase, but it's way more convenient and actually in a way that is not immediately susceptible to enclosure. But it does. There is that swap of the symbol without the swap of that aspect of the symbol. When it's not like social media isn't a huge subject of concern in our society, so it's not like that's not missing. Or it's not like that's missing from the context to write within.
I do have two more thoughts that I can share.
Yeah. Go ahead.
They're both kind of small details, but during the scene where the skateboarders are jumping across the roof and like Leo is like very like maybe not lazily but unathletically following them. The skateboarders like the way they're jumping and stuff. It reminded me of like superheroes and Spider-Man in particular, with like some of the poses they were doing and how like fluidly they were jumping across the rooftops and stuff. And then whenever Leo gets arrested, he says he's Batman, then he says he's Peter Parker, which I thought was kind of funny. And this next one is a little bit more, perhaps deeper and more incisive, perhaps. I don't know. But anyway, we haven't mentioned Jungle Pussy yet, which is just a great name. And during the bank robbery scene, she's on the table. She's standing on the table, talking very confidently about how the bank's money is going to fund the revolution, and how basically like all the people in there are their little bitch, basically. And then Perfidia shoots the security guard, and you can pretty much immediately see this like Jungle Pussy's face changes right when the shot rings out. And she suddenly is not confident. She suddenly looks very scared. And it does seem to me to be like to kind of that small scene is a depiction of the fact that, like before that in the movie, it's not clear. Like, I think the French 75, they free the immigrants, but I don't think they don't shoot their guns at all. The bombings they do are, I think, done whenever the buildings are empty. Which was definitely a thing for revolutionaries in the 70s, and I think it's kind of a callback to that. And I've seen people compare the French 75 to like the Wobblies, maybe not the Wobblies, but to the Weather Underground and stuff. But they do some like it. Like the revolutionaries in the movie do seem to be in some ways kind of like they don't seem to really be in touch with the downsides, the negatives to revolutionary violence. And I do think that Jungle Pussy's face changing immediately, and like how they just run out and stuff and immediately go into hiding. And also another thing that plays into what I'm saying is like none of them stand up to torture very well. I mean, none of them are even tortured. None of them stand up to interrogation very well. It does seem to be, whereas like the movie does seem to in some ways glorify revolutionary violence, I think it also kind of portrays people that do that violence as perhaps a little bit immature or kind of like getting off on the thrill of it rather than like the actual ends that they're trying to achieve. I guess I don't know. The second time I watched the movie, like whenever like it just like I really love the acting done by the Jungle Pussy character whenever the shot rings out, because her demeanor just immediately changes. from like ultra confidence to like, oh god, like shit has hit the fan, and now my life is fucked, basically. Where like the reality of what they're doing seems to really hit her like all in a second.
I appreciate you bringing that up because that's actually something that I think is one of those things that it's actually an issue of like the time shift, moving it into the modern day. Because like that is what Jungle Pussy was doing was actually what like a good revolutionary does in their society. She's standing on the desk making a show of power without using any guns, and is demonstrating through what like what she says can be easily written off as like stupid leftist posturing, but she is actually saying all of the right things. She is saying, I stand for you. I am not here to threaten you. I am not here to threaten anybody. I don't want anything from you. I want the money that is in this bank that is not yours and is not mine and should be put towards revolution. And I am here to tell you what we are doing with this money. This is not a bunch of people stealing money to get rich. This is not a bunch of people with masks on trying to, do something spooky in the background. We are here to make everyone's life better. And this is our demonstration of our power by not having not having a mask on, standing here saying my name proudly, basically being dressed as a streetwalker to highlight the point that she's just a normal person like the rest of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was an excellent scene because I think you're right. I think that to a large extent, like the French 75 were not prepared for what they got themselves into. At the same time, I don't necessarily interpret her face falling as, oh no, everything is horrible. Things have come home to roost, and more like, well, you have power when you have the gun, but not when you fire it. That's how I interpreted it. As more of a like, well, shit hit the fan. We need to get out of here right now. That doesn't necessarily imply a lack of dedication in her. And I do think it's interesting the way that we don't get to see the lead up to Perfidia shooting the security guard, because for all we know, she was hyper vigilant and the guy like shifted his weight and she shot. But also, she's not an idiot, so we kind of have to assume that he was going for his gun or something. And I think that kind of ambiguity is a really interesting one because it does, I think, to some extent diffuse that assumption that like, oh, these are a bunch of kids playing with guns who don't know what they're about.
Well, and I think that's also exemplified in her reaction after she shoots him the first time, and she's like pleading with him, like, stop moving. Just don't. She's so locked in at that moment and committed to, I've already started this, now I have to finish it if he keeps escalating it. And so there's that worry from her and that drive of like, just please, just, I don't want to do this, but now I have to if you push me to that point. And I think that speaks a lot to her character. But I do agree with you on the time shift thing on that part of it too. I think that's a big issue there, but I don't know how to resolve that. Unfortunately, I don't think it's so distracting that it keeps the movie from being what it is, but it is certainly there.
All right. Any other thoughts that we had that we wanted to share, either about it as an adaptation or as a film?
I do. I think the last thing I'll say on it, because we could, as with every episode of this goddamn show, we could go on endlessly. I loved the choice of ending the film with "American Girl" by Tom Petty. That I think was just a perfect song to kind of put a cap on everything. So yeah, well done, BTA.
He knows how to do a needle drop.
Yep.
All right, are we gonna give it a number ranking, like some kind of hack?
I think
how many Vinelands out of Vineland do you give it?
How many bejeweled chainsaws out of 15?
Did you feel the film defenestrated properly, or did it not break through the glass? I will say I would rank it among the best of PTA's films. I honestly, just even after one viewing, I think I might might say top 3 of his films for me. I think it's easily his best made film. My own personal enjoyment is a subjective thing, and I don't think that really matters. But I do think it's his most technically adept, most well put together, and as we talked about, his most accessible film.
Yeah, I mean, it's between that One Battle After Another and There Will Be Blood for me. I'm not as hot on. I do really love Magnolia and The Master and Phantom Thread even, but they're not. They're kind of a tier below for me. And I think One Battle After Another and There Will Be Blood are kind of contenders for the best PTA movie and also contenders, for my favorite movie of all time. Yeah, I don't. I know we've nitpicked a little bit with One Battle After Another, but no piece of art is ever going to be perfect, and I can't really. I don't know. I've just never seen a movie do what it does and be so kinetic and action packed, and fun to watch, and also have a good amount of depth and be a good amount of political and social commentary and timeliness. I've just never seen a movie like it, I guess. I'm really happy I'm alive whenever it was released and everything, so.
Yeah, I mean, I went into this movie, honestly trying a little bit to hate it, and I could not. And I've not yet seen Phantom Thread, so, I can't fairly say that it's the best Paul Thomas Anderson movie, and I'm not sure it's my favorite. But it does deserve that kind of attention. It is that good. I wouldn't denigrate anyone for saying it's their favorite movie of all time. It really was a masterful work of cinema.
True Kino.
Exactly.
True Kino, indeed. Yeah, I think I would be very curious. This is neither here nor there, but I would be very curious for your thoughts on Phantom Thread, Will. That's a movie that I don't know if I even fully grasped what it was about until I saw it the second time. But yeah, for me, I would say that this film is also up at the top of his filmography. Up there with There'll Be Blood, up there with Boogie Nights, up there with Punch Drunk Love. I'm not as hot on Magnolia as other people on this podcast.
You can just say my name. I know
Some of us.
I understand. I'm in rare company.
I'll say I do think Magnolia might be his most accessible. I get what y'all are saying, but Magnolia, despite the fact that it's 3 hours, 20 minutes long, and absurdly big in scope, it might be the most straightforward. Weirdly,
even with the frogs at the end.
I was about to say maybe until again,
look,
its flaws show pretty hard.
You have Exodus 2:8 that many times in the damn movie. No one should be surprised.
I know.
But you're assuming that even people who own Bibles will read them.
Well, right. I'm not. Look, people need to read their Bibles, okay? Memorize the chapters and verses.
We should all be pastors.
Get on the level. This is the level that literature has been written for hundreds of years, and we need to get back to that.
This is what happens when they take the Bibles out of the hotel rooms.
That's right. Gideon.
People stop understanding the ending of Magnolia.
It's just the Book of Mormon these days.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think definitely in the top half of his filmography. And yeah, if someone told me that this is their favorite movie, I would not guffaw at that whatsoever.
Unlike Magnolia.
People should like what they like. That's my opinion.
Yeah. I will also say, if you haven't, go watch his first film, Heart 8. Fantastic movie.
Very underrated.
Early John C. Reilly, early Philip Baker Hall. Well, not early.
Early Philip Baker Hall.
Early PTA and Philip Baker Hall's collaborations. Is what I should have said there. He was already well into his probably 60s at that point, but no,
early
that's
Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Early Philip Seymour Hoffman, yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, great. I think that was the only one of his movies that Michael Penn scored, because after that it was John Bryan and then Johnny Greenwood. But the score to that film was pretty good too, and Sam Jackson's in there, and Gwyneth Paltrow. So yeah, it's a great film if you haven't seen it. It's kind of harder to find. I don't think it's streaming anywhere, and the DVD may be out of print. But if you can find it, it's worth watching. It's fun.
I had to rent it digitally to watch it a few years ago, but it is worth it.
All right. Well, since up until then Heart 8 had not been mentioned, I guess now I have to come clean and say I have not seen Heart 8 or Phantom Thread.
Okay. Well, you have homework now.
I have homework as usual. I've got my rucksack full of papers.
Yeah.
To be burned.
Yeah. Some really good early examples of the one takes that he used to do that I was talking about. There's some scenes of walking through casinos in particular that are really well done in that film.
Oh, I guess this is something that maybe should have been brought up earlier. I'm struggling to remember. Has he done the Dollhouse style scene cutting before, where you pan across a set, treating it like it's a cross-cut house? Paul Thomas Anderson, I mean, yeah.
I'm trying to think if I want to say Boogie Nights had shots like that. The opening shot is something like that, but it's more of a long, like a tracking shot through a dollhouse, like a really big one. Yeah. And then there's a scene later in that when you're going through the house when they're filming one of the movies. So I think that, well, no, you could make the argument there's a scene in Magnolia where they're walking through the TV production set. It's kind of like that, I guess, but I think after that he kind of tampered down on that a little bit. I think Punch Drunk Love was kind of the shifting point for him with a lot of his early career techniques into what he's kind of doing. Like after Punch Drunk Love, it became a little bit more of a different filmmaking style, and he kind of developed his current preferences for how he shoots things and the choices he makes. Not a bad thing by any means.
So inspired by Scorsese.
Maybe it's also when he stopped doing cocaine, but I don't.
Also possible. You know, losing Fiona Apple will do a lot of things to you, I think.
Yeah, and stop maybe not hanging out with Quentin Tarantino all the time.
Yeah. All right. So, I think we all ended up realizing that we had more to talk about this movie than we maybe thought. But yeah, that's your sort of emergency broadcast for Mapping the Zone for the week. I think it's pretty obvious that all of us would say definitely go see this movie, definitely go support this movie. It is not just a good adaptation of Vineland, but it is also just a really excellent film in general. So that brings our discussion on one battle after another to a close. As we've said numerous times, definitely go see this movie. Definitely make sure that it gets as much money as it can in the box office. And that sort of brings us to the end of our show. Our next episode coming out is going to be on chapter 21 of Against the Day, so we're just going to be slotting back into our regular routine with that one. And we're going to keep on trucking with that until Shadow Ticket comes out, as we're all excited for there. But until next time, thank you all for listening. If you have any thoughts on the movie, on Pynchon's books, on Against the Day, or whatsoever, you can contact us through a number of different routes. We are on Twitter at PynchonPod, although not very active. We are also on Blue Sky at Mapping the Zone. We are on Instagram at Mapping the Zone. You can send us emails directly and drop us a line at mappingthezonepod@gmail.com. And if you like our show and you think it's worth $1, then we would love to have that dollar. You can send any donations you may want to route in our direction on Ko-Fi, and we're on Ko-Fi at Mapping the Zone. That helps us pay for equipment that we need to replace, hosting fees, and in this case, movie tickets. So thank you once again to all of our listeners who have listened and liked our show enough to donate to it. And yeah, until next time, thank you again for listening.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.